Daniel Brooks walked home late at night, his hands stuffed into his jacket pockets. The cold wind blew against his face, and the streets were nearly empty. It had been a long, tiring day at the mechanic shop where he worked. All he wanted was to reach his small, quiet house and sleep. As he turned onto his street, he heard soft footsteps behind him. He glanced over his shoulder and saw a dog, a scruffy, golden-furred stray. The dog kept its distance but followed him closely. Daniel frowned. "Go home," he muttered, waving his hand to shoo it away. But the dog didn't leave. It simply stood there, staring at him with big, dark eyes. Daniel sighed and kept walking. He wasn't in the mood to deal with a stray dog. But the dog followed him the entire way. A strange encounter. Reaching his front door, Daniel turned around. The dog stopped a few feet away, ears perked up, tail wagging slightly. It looked hungry but didn't come closer. "You can't stay here," Daniel said firmly. He stepped inside, shut the door, and locked it. But as he sat down, he could still feel those eyes watching him. He got up, peeked out the window, and there it was. The dog was still there, lying down near his doorstep. Something about the dog made his chest tighten. Why was it following him? Where did it come from? An unwanted guest. The next morning, Daniel opened the door and looked around. The dog was gone. He let out a breath of relief. He didn't need extra problems in his life. But as he walked to work, he noticed something strange. The dog was back, watching him from a distance, following his steps once again. "Seriously?" Daniel muttered, shaking his head. He ignored it and kept walking. Hours later, after finishing his shift, he stepped outside, and there it was again, waiting near the shop. Daniel groaned. "What do you want from me?" The dog simply wagged its tail, as if happy to see him. Despite himself, Daniel felt a small smile tug at his lips, but he quickly pushed the feeling away. He didn't need attachments, not anymore. The first connection. That night, the dog followed him home again. Daniel sighed and sat on his porch. The dog stood a few feet away, looking hopeful. "Fine," Daniel muttered. He reached into his bag, pulled out a leftover sandwich, and tossed it toward the dog. But something strange happened. The dog didn't eat it. Instead, it just looked at Daniel, its deep, sad eyes locked onto his. Daniel felt a shiver run through him. It was almost as if the dog knew him. And for the first time in a long while, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years: curiosity. Who was this dog, and why wouldn't it leave him alone? Daniel woke up to the sound of soft scratching at his front door. He sat up, rubbing his tired eyes. For a moment, he thought he had imagined it, but then he heard it again, a light scratching noise, followed by a faint whimper. He groaned and walked to the door. When he opened it, he wasn't surprised to see the golden-furred dog sitting on his porch, wagging its tail. "You again?" he muttered. The dog tilted its head, ears perked up. Daniel sighed. "I don't have food for you." The dog didn't move. It just sat there, staring at him with those same sad, knowing eyes. Daniel felt something stir inside him. He had seen that look before, a look of quiet pain, a look of waiting. With a heavy sigh, he stepped back and opened the door wider. "Fine," he muttered. "You can come in, just for tonight." A new companion. The dog hesitated at first, as if unsure whether it was really welcome, but after a few seconds, it stepped inside and sniffed the air. Daniel watched as it moved cautiously around the small living room, its tail wagging slightly. "You're probably hungry," Daniel said, walking to the kitchen. He grabbed a plate and placed some leftover chicken on it. The dog sniffed the food and finally started eating. Daniel felt a strange sense of relief watching it. After finishing, the dog curled up on the old rug near the couch. It let out a soft sigh, its body relaxing for the first time. Daniel shook his head. "You're making yourself at home already, huh?" The dog didn't respond, of course, but something about its peaceful expression made Daniel feel less alone. A name for the stranger. The next morning, Daniel woke up early. He expected the dog to be gone. But when he stepped into the living room, there it was, still curled up on the rug, sleeping soundly. Daniel stood there, arms crossed. "You really don't want to leave, do you?" The dog's ear twitched, and then it lifted its head to look at him. For the first time in a long time, Daniel chuckled. "All right," he said. "If you're staying, you need a name." He thought for a moment, watching the way the dog's fur caught the morning light. "Rusty," he finally said. "That suits you." Rusty's tail thumped against the floor. Daniel shook his head, amused. "Guess that means you like it." An unexpected bond. Later that day, Daniel stepped outside, expecting Rusty to run off now that he had eaten and rested. But to his surprise, the dog followed him again. As he walked to work, Rusty stayed close, keeping up with his steps. People on the street noticed. An old woman smiled. "Nice dog you got there." Daniel almost corrected her. Rusty wasn't his dog. But when he looked down and saw Rusty trotting beside him, something in his chest softened. Maybe he didn't mind the company. At the mechanic shop, Daniel glanced outside now and then. Rusty was waiting near the entrance, lying down patiently. For years, Daniel had lived in silence and routine, stuck in his grief. But now something was changing. As he stepped out of the shop that evening and saw Rusty waiting, Daniel realized something. This wasn't just a stray dog anymore. Rusty had chosen him. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't feel alone. Daniel never planned to keep Rusty. At first, he thought the dog would leave after a few days. But Rusty stayed. Every morning, he followed Daniel to work. Every night, he curled up on the rug near the couch. And slowly, Daniel got used to it. He bought a small bag of dog food from the store. "Don't get too comfortable," he told Rusty as he poured food into a bowl. "I'm not keeping you." Rusty wagged his tail and ate happily. Daniel sighed. He knew the truth. He already cared about this dog. Strange behavior. One night, Daniel was sitting on the couch, reading an old newspaper, when Rusty suddenly sat up. His ears twitched and his body stiffened. Then, without warning, he ran to the front door and scratched at it. Daniel frowned. "What is it, boy?" Rusty let out a low whimper. He paced in circles, then scratched at the door again, more urgently this time. Daniel hesitated. It was late. The streets were quiet. But something about Rusty's behavior made him uneasy. Finally, he sighed, grabbed his jacket, and opened the door. "All right, let's see what's so important." Rusty bolted outside. The silent path. Daniel followed as Rusty trotted ahead, his nose close to the ground. The dog moved with purpose, as if he knew exactly where he was going. They walked past dimly lit streets, old buildings, and closed shops. The air was cool, and Daniel pulled his jacket tighter around himself. Then Rusty turned down a narrow, forgotten alleyway. Daniel hesitated. "Rusty, what are we doing here?" The dog didn't stop. He walked deeper into the alley, then suddenly stopped in front of a rusted metal gate. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He recognized this place. Ghosts of the past. Beyond the gate stood an old, abandoned house, a house Daniel hadn't seen in years. He felt his chest tighten. This was his old home, the place where he had lived with his wife before she passed away. Daniel swallowed hard. He hadn't been back here since the accident. The memories were too painful. But why had Rusty brought him here? His hands trembled as he pushed the gate open. The house looked frozen in time, covered in dust and shadows. Then Daniel noticed something in the backyard. His heart stopped. There, under the faint glow of the streetlight, stood an old, weathered doghouse. His breath caught in his throat as he stepped closer. The name carved into the wood was familiar. Buddy. A shocking realization. Daniel felt dizzy. He reached out and traced the carved letters with his fingers. Buddy. That was the name of his old dog. The dog he and his wife had rescued years ago. The dog that had gone missing after his wife's accident. Daniel turned slowly and looked at Rusty. His heart pounded. The golden fur, the deep, knowing eyes. It couldn't be. "Buddy?" Daniel whispered, his voice shaking. Rusty didn't move. He just looked at him, really looked at him. And in that moment, Daniel knew the truth. Somehow, against all odds, his old dog had found him again. Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes as he knelt down. "It's you," he whispered. "You came back." Rusty, no, Buddy, wagged his tail and stepped closer, pressing his head against Daniel's chest. And for the first time in years, Daniel let the past in. Daniel sat on the ground, his hands resting gently on Rusty, no, Buddy's golden fur. His heart pounded in his chest. Could it really be true? His fingers traced the faint scar on Buddy's right ear, a mark he suddenly remembered. His wife, Emma, had once told him that scar makes him special. A lump formed in Daniel's throat. He swallowed hard and looked into Buddy's deep, familiar eyes. "You're really him, aren't you?" he whispered. Buddy wagged his tail, stepping closer, pressing his warm body against Daniel's chest. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something break inside him. He had spent so long pushing his past away, locking his pain deep inside. But now, the past had found its way back to him. Memories of a lost friend. Daniel's mind drifted back to the days when Buddy had been part of this family. Emma had found Buddy as a stray puppy, cold and hungry, during a rainy evening, just like the night Daniel first saw him. "He needs us," she had said, smiling as she wrapped Buddy in a warm towel. Daniel hadn't wanted the dog back then. He thought they didn't have time. But Emma's love for Buddy had been impossible to ignore, and soon, Buddy became part of their home. He had been there through everything, their happiest days, their hardest moments. And then, after the accident, Buddy disappeared. Daniel had searched for him everywhere, calling his name down empty streets, but Buddy never came back. Eventually, Daniel stopped looking. It was too painful. He convinced himself that Buddy was gone forever. But now, here he was. Buddy had found him again. A heartbreaking question. Tears burned in Daniel's eyes as he looked at his old friend. "Where did you go, boy?" he whispered. Buddy whined softly and licked Daniel's hand, as if trying to erase years of distance in a single touch. Daniel exhaled shakily. "You waited for me, didn't you?" Buddy's eyes held the answer, yes. Daniel felt something deep inside him break. He pulled Buddy close, hugging him tightly. "I'm so sorry," he choked. "I thought you were gone." Buddy let out a soft huff, leaning into him. It was as if he was saying, "I never left you. I was just waiting for you to find me again." The weight of the past. Daniel sat there for a long time, lost in his emotions. The cold wind blew softly around them, but he barely noticed. For years, he had avoided this place, avoided his pain. After Emma's death, he had shut everything out. He had stopped visiting her favorite places, stopped talking about her, stopped feeling. He had let himself believe that being alone was easier than facing the past. But Buddy had never forgotten. Even after all these years, Buddy had found his way home. And maybe it was time for Daniel to do the same. A new beginning. Slowly, Daniel stood up. Buddy watched him carefully, tail wagging slightly. "Come on, boy," Daniel said, his voice steadier now. "Let's go home." As they walked away from the old house, Daniel didn't feel as empty anymore. For the first time in years, he felt something warm inside him, hope. Because now he knew the truth. Some bonds can never be broken. And no matter how lost you feel, love always finds its way back home. Daniel and Buddy walked home together in silence, but something had changed. For the first time in years, Daniel didn't feel alone. As they reached his small house, Buddy wagged his tail and looked up at him, as if asking, "Are we really home?" Daniel smiled faintly and opened the door. "Yeah, boy, we're home." Buddy trotted inside, sniffing the air before settling onto the rug near the couch, just like he used to. Daniel sat down and ran a hand through his hair. His mind was spinning. How had Buddy survived all these years? Where had he been? One thing was clear. Buddy had never forgotten him. And that thought warmed Daniel's heart in a way he hadn't felt in a long, long time. The first step forward. The next morning, Daniel woke up to the sound of paws tapping on the wooden floor. Buddy was already up, tail wagging as he nudged Daniel's hand with his wet nose. Daniel chuckled. "You're just the same as before." He got up and stretched. For years, mornings had been slow and heavy. But today, something felt different, lighter. He poured himself some coffee and grabbed Buddy's food bowl, filling it with fresh kibble. As Buddy ate happily, Daniel found himself watching him with quiet amazement. He had spent so much time avoiding the past, but the past had come back to him in the best way possible. Maybe it was time to stop running from it. An unexpected visit. Later that afternoon, Daniel decided to take Buddy for a walk. It had been years since he had walked a dog, but Buddy remembered everything. He stayed close, trotting beside him like he had never left. They strolled through town, past familiar streets, past the little cafe where Daniel and Emma used to go for coffee. Daniel hesitated, then took a deep breath. Maybe it was time to visit some old places again. As he stood outside the cafe, lost in thought, a voice called out, "Daniel?" He turned and saw an older woman with kind eyes staring at him. It took him a second to recognize her. Mrs. Thompson, she had been their neighbor years ago. She gasped, "Is that Buddy?" Daniel felt his throat tighten. He nodded. "Yeah, he came back." Tears filled Mrs. Thompson's eyes. "Oh, Daniel, I remember how much Emma loved that dog. She'd be so happy to know he found his way home." Daniel swallowed hard. He hadn't talked about Emma in so long. Mrs. Thompson placed a gentle hand on his arm. "It's good to see you again. We all worried about you after everything." Daniel looked down at Buddy, who wagged his tail as if he understood. Maybe he had worried about Daniel too. A heart finally opens. As they continued their walk, Daniel found himself thinking about what Mrs. Thompson had said. Emma would have been happy. She had always believed in second chances, in love that never faded. And now Daniel had been given one too. As he sat on a bench in the park, watching Buddy chase a squirrel, a weight he had carried for years finally began to lift. "Guess we're both getting a fresh start, huh?" he murmured. Buddy ran back to him, tail wagging, eyes full of life. Daniel smiled, feeling something he hadn't in a long time. Peace. The days passed, and Daniel slowly adjusted to life with Buddy again. Every morning, Buddy woke him up by nudging his hand. They ate breakfast together, Daniel with his coffee, Buddy with his food bowl, and every evening, they took walks around town, visiting places Daniel had once avoided. For years, Daniel had shut the world out, but now, with Buddy by his side, he started to see life differently. A visit to the past. One Saturday morning, Daniel stood outside the cemetery. He hadn't been here in years. His hands trembled slightly as he walked toward a familiar grave, Emma's. Buddy stayed close, his warm presence steadying Daniel's heart. He took a deep breath and knelt down. "Hey, Em," he said softly. "It's been a while." The wind rustled through the trees, filling the quiet space around him. Daniel hesitated, then gave a small smile. "Guess who found his way back to me?" Buddy stepped forward and sat beside the headstone, his tail wagging gently. Daniel's throat tightened. "I lost myself after you were gone," he admitted. "I thought I could keep going alone, but I was wrong." He reached down, running his fingers through Buddy's fur. "This guy never gave up on me," he said. "He waited all these years." For the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't just feel pain standing there. He felt thankful. He wiped his eyes and let out a breath. "I promise, Em, I'm going to start living again." Buddy let out a soft bark as if he approved. New beginnings. Later that day, Daniel sat outside a small cafe, watching Buddy rest at his feet. A woman at the next table smiled. "Your dog is beautiful." Daniel chuckled. "Yeah, he's special." She tilted her head. "You talk about him like he's an old friend." Daniel thought for a moment, then nodded. "That's because he is." They talked for a while, about dogs, about life, about things Daniel had forgotten how to enjoy. When he finally got up to leave, something inside him felt lighter. The road ahead. That evening, Daniel sat on his porch, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. Buddy lay beside him, his eyes half closed in contentment. Daniel smiled. "You never gave up on me, did you?" Buddy's tail thumped against the wooden floor. Daniel exhaled deeply, feeling something new in his chest, hope. For the first time in years, he looked at the future and saw more than just loneliness. He saw possibility. As the stars began to appear in the sky, Daniel reached down and scratched Buddy's ears. Let's keep moving forward, boy, he whispered. Together. And for the first time in a long time, he truly believed in tomorrow. The weeks passed, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt alive again. Buddy had changed everything. His presence filled Daniel's house with warmth. His wagging tail brought joy to every morning, and his deep, trusting eyes reminded Daniel that he wasn't alone anymore. Daniel started going out more, visiting old places, talking to people, smiling again. It was slow, but day by day, he was rebuilding his life. And it was all because Buddy had come back. A day like no other. One morning, Daniel woke up early and stretched. Buddy, as always, was by his side, tail wagging. "Ready for our walk?" Daniel asked, smiling. Buddy barked excitedly, running to the door. They stepped outside, the sun casting a golden glow over the quiet streets. It was a perfect morning. As they walked through the park, Daniel noticed a little boy crying near a bench. A woman, probably his mother, was kneeling beside him, looking worried. Daniel hesitated, then walked over. "Is everything okay?" The woman sighed. "My son lost his puppy yesterday. We've been searching everywhere, but we can't find him." Daniel's heart clenched. He knew what it was like to lose someone you loved. Buddy, sensing the sadness, trotted over to the boy. He wagged his tail and licked the boy's hand gently. The boy sniffled and wiped his tears. "He's a nice dog," he murmured. Daniel knelt beside them. "Buddy knows what it's like to be lost," he said softly. "But he also knows that love always finds its way back." The boy looked up at him, eyes wide with hope. Daniel smiled. "Don't give up, kid. Your puppy is out there. Just keep looking." The boy nodded. "I will." As Daniel and Buddy walked away, he felt something warm in his chest. Maybe he had lost so much in the past, but today, he had given someone else hope. A special visit. That afternoon, Daniel took Buddy to a place he hadn't been in years, the animal shelter. As they stepped inside, the familiar smell of clean kennels and soft barks filled the air. A young volunteer approached him. "Can I help you?" Daniel hesitated, then glanced down at Buddy. "I want to help," he said. The volunteer smiled. "We're always looking for people to walk the dogs. Would you like to?" Daniel looked around at the lonely eyes behind the cages. Dogs who had been abandoned. Dogs waiting for someone to take them home. He nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." As Buddy wagged his tail, Daniel knew this was just the beginning. He had spent years shutting the world out. Now he was ready to open his heart again. Love never fades. That evening, Daniel sat on his porch, Buddy resting beside him. The stars twinkled above, and a soft breeze rustled the trees. Daniel exhaled deeply, feeling a peace he hadn't felt in years. "You saved me, Buddy," he whispered. Buddy looked up, his deep eyes filled with understanding. Daniel reached down, scratching behind Buddy's ears. "Thank you for never giving up on me." Buddy licked his hand, his way of saying, "I never will." And as Daniel sat there, watching the night sky, he finally understood. Love never fades. Love always finds its way back home. Daniel woke up early the next morning, the sunlight filtering softly through the curtains. It was a beautiful day, the kind that promised new beginnings. Buddy was already awake, sitting by the door with his tail wagging. "Ready for our walk, old friend?" Daniel asked, smiling. Buddy barked happily in response, and they stepped outside together, the world feeling more alive than it had in a long time. As they walked through the neighborhood, Daniel noticed how much had changed. He had started to open up again, to reconnect with the world he had once shut himself off from. He had visited the animal shelter many times since that first visit, and he had adopted a few more dogs. It felt good to give back. The world didn't feel so empty anymore. A beautiful surprise. One afternoon, as Daniel and Buddy were returning from their usual walk, they noticed something different, a small handmade sign in front of a nearby park. The sign read, "Adopt a Friend Day. Help a dog find a home." Daniel paused, reading the sign with a sense of wonder. This was something Emma would have loved. She had always wanted to help animals, especially dogs who needed a second chance. Without thinking, Daniel smiled. "Let's go, Buddy." They walked toward the park, where a small group of volunteers was gathered with several dogs, each looking for a loving home. Daniel's heart warmed as he saw the dogs wagging their tails, excited for the possibility of a new family. One of the volunteers noticed Daniel and waved. "Hi there, would you like to meet some of our dogs?" Daniel nodded. "I'd love to." Buddy stayed close by his side as they walked among the dogs. Daniel couldn't help but notice how much his heart had healed. He had come so far from the man who had locked himself away from the world, hiding from his grief. He stopped by a kennel where a small, scruffy dog with big brown eyes looked up at him. "This one's special," the volunteer said. "Her name's Daisy. She's been waiting for a home for a long time." Daniel knelt down and reached out to pet Daisy. She sniffed his hand before wagging her tail and nuzzling against him. It was like she knew, like she understood the bond between them. "I think she's the one," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. The volunteer smiled, and Daniel could see the joy in her eyes. "You've made a great choice." A new beginning. That evening, as Daniel sat with Buddy and Daisy on the couch, a sense of peace washed over him. Buddy lay at his feet, his head resting on Daniel's lap, while Daisy curled up beside him, both dogs content and happy. Daniel smiled as he looked at the two of them. His life had changed in ways he couldn't have imagined. He had opened his heart to love again, to giving back, to accepting the past and moving forward with the future. For so long, he had been lost in his own pain, but now, surrounded by these dogs, he felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't alone. As Buddy and Daisy settled into their spots, Daniel sat back, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He had been given a second chance, not just to heal, but to make a difference. He thought about Emma, about all the good things she had brought into his life. He could almost feel her beside him, smiling, proud of the man he had become. "You would have loved Daisy," Daniel whispered, "and Buddy too. They're both part of our story." Buddy raised his head and gave a soft bark as if agreeing. Daniel reached down and scratched his ear. "We've made it, haven't we?" Buddy's tail wagged, and Daisy let out a content sigh. The past had been painful, but it had also shaped who he was today. Daniel had learned that love never truly fades, and sometimes the greatest healing comes when you open your heart to those who need it the most. Buddy, Daisy, and Daniel, together, they had found something beautiful. They had found family. And that was all that mattered.